All right, we're at Genesis 30. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children, she became jealous of her sister. Because her sisters had 4 kids. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's when this is happening. The Bible sometimes doesn't necessarily move exactly sequentially, so this could have happened when she was in the second child. So we'll see if it clarifies, but I do want to make that note that I've kind of noticed that pattern so far, and I hope that you have too. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children, she became jealous of her sister, Leah. Give me children or I'll die, she exclaimed to Jacob. So that's an extreme course of when you are so jealous and so taken over with that misery that you're like, I'm to the point of death. That's pretty extreme. Yeah, Jacob flew into a rage. Am I God? He asked. He's the only one able to give you children. That's a really big statement, and that's a really good thing that he knows. And the other one, it says he became angry with her and said, "And am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" So he's saying, look, that's something you got to take up with God, not me. Okay? Because clearly I'm not the problem. I don't know if you saw that your sisters had 4 children. Oh, that's what's making you... Yeah, well, I don't want to bring that up. But let's just assume maybe it's not me. And maybe I don't have control over that. Okay? There's not some secret thing I'm doing with your sister that I'm not doing with you. Sorry. Okay, so he is the only one who is able to give you children. He's the one that's keeping you from having children. Then Rachel told him, sleep with my servant Bilhah, and she will bear children for me. Which we've seen this before in this descendancy. We've seen this before with Sarai, and that didn't go so well. So I think that it's very interesting that you see these patterns that kind of form as far as how we try to solve problems and when we take matters into our own hands. But I think that it's interesting that it's the same kind of situation. Wow, interesting. Okay, so verse 4. So Rachel gave him Bilhah to be his wife, and Jacob slept with her. I love that the men, too, are always like, I mean, if I gotta. Yeah, that's just so casual about having all these multiple wives and just being like, no, okay. That's, okay, verse 5. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Yay! So the plan worked. Let's see how it plays out. Rachel named him Dan. Says Dan is a play on the Hebrew term meaning to vindicate or to judge. For she said, God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son. So what's interesting is that Leah was looking at these children as like a not a power play, but like as more love currency. Like, this is going to earn me more favor with my husband. He's going to love me more. And then Rachel like sees this as like, oh, good, my servant had a child. Ha ha! Vindication, justice. But she does give God the credit. It's just, just like God opened Leah's womb, but, she framed that differently in her mind than maybe what God intended. And I think that we all can do that very often, so that's probably why that stood up to me. God forgive us for the places where we don't receive your blessings with the proper perspective. So help open our eyes to that. He heard my request and gave me a son. He's vindicated me. Verse 7, then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Jacob's getting around. All right, verse 8, Rachel named him Naphtali, for she said, I have had an intense struggle with my sister, and I am winning. Another child, and another child that is used as power play or for worth, or in this weird competition now for a sister. Let's see what the translation for Naphtali is, even though I'm pretty sure it's what Rachel just said. Naphtali means my struggle. Okay, I've had an intense struggle with my sister. Okay, so it's struggle. The other one, vindication. So interesting that even though she's vindicated, there's still this intense struggle going on, because it's like, good, you had a child. That's one. Who got 4? I don't know how the sisters are reacting. We don't see that, but you see that it's still obviously weighing on her. I've had an intense struggle with my sister, and I am winning. Verse 9, meanwhile, Leah realized she wasn't getting pregnant anymore. Here it comes. So she gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob to be his wife. Okay, so that's fine. You got a servant. Well, I had 4 and I've got a servant, so game on. Oh, man. Sibling rivalry at its finest. Verse 10. Soon Zilpah presented him with another son. Leah named him Gad, for she said, how fortunate I am. Gad. Let's see what that translates to. Good fortune. Gad. Good fortune. Egad. Good fortune. Man, 12. Then Zilpah produced a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said, what joy is mine! The other women will consider me happy indeed. Oh, Asher means happy. They don't seem very happy for having these kids, or they seem happy for the wrong reasons, maybe. To me. Oh my goodness, let's see what happens. 14. One day during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes growing in a field and brought the roots to his mother Leah. Rachel begged Leah to give some of them to her, but Leah angrily replied, wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Ooh, girl. Now you will steal my son's mandrake roots too? So they're not in the business of sharing, other than Jacob. Goodness gracious. Rachel said, I will let him sleep with you tonight in exchange for the mandrake roots. Oh my gosh. Oh, so many twisted values going on here. And I know that some of it crosses cultural boundaries that I don't need to be offended or shocked by. But, the bartering that is going on, and the power plays, and I don't know. Interesting perspective. I don't even know what to say about that. 16. So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the fields, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me tonight, she said. I have paid for you with some mandrake roots my son has found. I cannot imagine coming home and being greeted to something like that. Oh my gosh. Oh, but it's Tuesday. I'm with Rachel on Tuesdays, and then, I'm with Zilpah on Wednesday, and then you on Thursday, and then, he's got 4 women here that is, so I guess, but it's interesting that she does this. I've paid for you, okay? Your services. So Jacob slept with her. No argument. Interesting. 17. And God answered her prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to her 5th son. Golly. She named him Issachar. Issachar sounds like a Hebrew term that means reward. For she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. I have a feeling like God shook his head so many times. Like, hey, thanks for honoring me with a name, but wrong. Not why I'm doing that. But I don't want to question that because I don't know that that's not correct. But it seems not correct. Anyway, then she became pregnant again and had a 6th son. She named him Zebulun. Zebulun probably means honor, for she said, God has given me good gifts for my husband. Now he will honor me, for I have given him 6 sons. Given me good gifts for my husband, and now he's going to honor me. Again, she's thinking about how she's going to be honored. That changed again. Later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. 22. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by giving her a child. I think it's interesting that it says God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. Remembered Rachel, God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived. Okay, so God remembers. Another thing that we've seen before, but interesting that it states it in that way. And he listened. Okay, she gave birth to a son. God has removed my shame, she said, and she named him Joseph, which means may he add. For she said, may the Lord give me yet another son. Oh, man. Interesting. So, lots of kiddos here at this point, and Rachel's still excited that may more be added. And Jacob's wealth is increasing in this next thing, or Jacob's flocks increase, or in King James Version, Jacob's bargain with Laban. So we've seen all this as far as like kids being born, Jacob getting around, being bought with mandrakes, being a man something. Anyway, so kids is happening, y'all. His wealth increases, his flocks might increase, his household, but in separate sister wife kind of houses. His households increase as well. So let's see what happens. Verse 25. Soon after Joseph was born to Rachel, Jacob said to Laban, I want to go back home. Let me take my wives and children, for I have earned them from you, and let me be on my way. You know I have fully paid for them with my services to you. My service to you, with how much work I've done for you. So that's interesting. That now he's like, look, my household has increased. I not only have a wife from my home, I've got two. I've technically got four, okay, with their servants, Zilpah and Bilhah. So I'm ready to go home. I've done what I need to do here. And I think that's interesting that he's still got that on the mind, because that was kind of hey, he's sent away so that he doesn't marry, but he needs to return so that he can inherit that land. That's part of that arrangement that he made with the Lord. Please don't leave me, Laban replied, for I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because you are here. And that's very, very striking, because again, you see Laban like saying, okay, the Lord has received this, he's revealed this to me, and then he's saying, my blessing is coming from you. Always in this lineage, we see people recognizing that God is blessing them and that it blesses others in that proximity. How much do I owe you? Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Laban's immediately going to the bottom line. Jacob replied, you know how faithfully I've served you through these many years and how your flocks and herds have grown. You had little indeed before I came, and your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you from everything I do. He's saying, yeah, you're right. But now, what about me? When should I provide for my own family? He's like, look, everything that I'm doing is making you richer. And now I got like a household. I got all these kids, man. I need to do something to provide for them. I think that's interesting. 31. What wages do you want? Laban asked again. Jacob replied, don't give me anything at all. Just do one thing and I'll go back to work for you. Let me go out among your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the dark-colored sheep. Give them to me as my wages. So I think that it's interesting that he goes through and gets these spotted, speckled sheep and the dark-colored sheep, these that you can see a difference in, and he says, give those to me as my wages. Not some future thing, but something that already exists and something that is naturally divided there. This will make it easy for you to see whether or not I have been honest. Okay, so he's worried about like how it's going to appear, and that's interesting. If you find in my flock any white sheep or goats that are not speckled, you will know that I have stolen them from you. So he's setting in kind of this built-in accountability and a system for judgment there. So that's really interesting. All right, Laban replied, it will be as you have said. But that very day, Laban went out and removed all the male goats that were speckled and spotted, the females that were speckled and spotted with any white patches, and all the dark-colored sheep. He placed them in the care of his sons, and they took them 3 days' distance from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for Laban's flock. So we see what seems like deceit here. Let's keep going. Now Jacob took fresh shoots from poplar, almond, and plane trees and peeled off strips in the bark to make white streaks on them. Then he set up these peeled branches beside the watering troughs so Laban's flocks would see them as they came to drink, for that was when they mated. So when the flocks mated in front of the white streaked branches, all of their offspring were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Jacob added them to his own flock, thus separating the lambs from Laban's flock. Then at mating time, he turned the flocks toward the streaked and dark-colored rams in Laban's flock. This is how he built his flock from Laban's. Okay, so he's playing the long game here. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob set up the peeled branches in front of them, but he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob's flocks increased rapidly, and he became very wealthy with many servants, camels, and donkeys. You see this favor continuing, but I think what's interesting is that doesn't say anything about how the Lord instructed him to do that. That's just this interesting thing that he started to do, knowing what he knows about sheep and their mating and what that's going to produce. So very interesting that Laban tries this separation on his own and to keep those things anyway and to keep Jacob from that blessing, but he's being blessed anyway. And I would give that credit to the Lord, but I would also, if you were to argue and say, no, that's Jacob's planning, his ability. Yeah, but God gave him that wisdom. You see what I mean? So either way, it's working out to Jacob's blessing, and I believe God is going before him in that, especially when we look at the patterns of everything that has come before. So even though Laban tried to deceive him on the daughter end, like it wound up multiplying and increasing Jacob's household and these many nations, right? You see now that this is happening, even though Laban tried to, again, deceive him and keep certain things to himself and benefit himself and his household, what happens? You've got the Lord going ahead and blessing and being faithful in that still. So I think that's interesting. I think it's very interesting. And it helps us, again, to kind of see a proper perspective. If we can keep that in mind, knowing that God's going to be faithful in that even when you see circumstances or things seem like, well, what do I have now? We can remember those things. And I love that pattern is showing up again. Even without a direct interaction from the Lord. Even with the only interaction we saw in this chapter with the Lord was Laban saying, I've learned from divination. I've learned from the Lord that he's blessing you, and I'm being blessed because of that. But that could just be something that Laban's saying. We don't know. A lot of these other experiences with the Lord aren't just somebody just saying that. We get a glimpse into, no, God gave him this vision, or God visited him in a dream. So that's interesting too. What stood out to you?